listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined with my friend Ashley Sedorovich. She is a healer and the owner of Wild Oak Wellness. Her primary healing modalities are homeopathy, flower essences, Reiki, and gentle movement using Pilates-informed techniques. She came to natural healing when her daughter was born because she wanted to find a better, less toxic way to care for a tiny human. Ashley enjoys being a mom more than anything, constantly learning about the things that interest her and being creative. When she does have some downtime, you'll find her curled up with a book, her puppies, and her kitties. Well, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am so excited. I wish I could just let you know how I have anticipated this and how many people have wanted to learn about flower essences. So
I know, I'm so excited. I mean, gosh, we've been talking about it for a while and I'm like, the day is finally here. Yay.
Right? We both kind of geek out on this topic, so I feel like it's going to be really fun
Yeah.
because I just have a lot of enthusiasm about it and my own personal experiences. So I feel like we'll be able to pull from each other really well. So
Yeah. Exciting.
So to get started, could you share just a little bit about what drew you to flower essences and a little overview about what they are?
Yeah. So, flower essences really came to me through homeopathy. I had not heard of them until I started working with my homeopath on my constitutional care journey. And as I was going through that, there were emotions that were coming up that often come up in healing. Mm-hmm. And she suggested that I look into flower essences. And I was like, flower essences? I was like, what? What about flower essences? And I'm like, I'm already doing this homeopathy thing. That's enough new things for me to take on at the moment, but kind of cataloged it in the back of my mind. And then, as the universe does the universe things, it kept plucking it in front of me over and over and over again until I finally couldn't ignore it anymore. And I sat down when I was told that there was going to be a class on flower essences and that I should consider taking it. And I was like, well, if this isn't a sign, then I don't know what is.
Right.
And I took this class and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like light bulbs were going off left and right. I'm like, this makes so much sense. And I understand, it was just one of those things that when you know,
right.
And it connected all of the pieces for me. And the teacher that I was working with in the class had explained to them in terms of their vibrational components and how they're energetically connected. And she was using all of this language that I was so familiar with and so connected with. And I'm like, that's how I knew that this was where I was meant to be at this moment in time. And that flower essences really were a critical, a critical part of my journey. It just felt connected to them in that way that you just can't really explain. You just know, they feel like a familiar friend.
Right.
Yeah. That has always been there.
We've all had experiences with flowers or plants where you can kind of just feel that resonance, something's drawing you.
Yeah, well, and
it.
And you think about people talk about forest bathing and
right.
and spending time out in nature, and there's this popular meme that I see going around now that if you're busy, you should spend 20 minutes a day in nature, and if you're busy, you should spend more. And
right.
it's because of that. It's because that everything is living and everything has energy that it promotes. And, when you need that in your life, you feel connected to that and it helps, bring you back in alignment. And it's simple. It's
right.
so simple. It's just go out there and be and
right.
breathe. And it just, it just works that way. And, we can get into like the science behind that like a different day, but like just the simplicity of it even like draws you to it and just kind of like pulls you in and just makes you feel like, I don't know, warm and cozy and like what you need at that like moment in time.
Because we are nature. And so it would make sense that when we're in kind of a state of disharmony, well, what's going to bring us back? It's going to be retreating back into, our true state, which is a very natural, organic state, like the way that the forest is all coming together in the symbiotic way. And when we're in that state, we're all kind of working together to bring ourselves back in to that harmony. And so I feel like, that's how I've kind of viewed flower essences. I was the opposite. So I worked with flower essences before I even knew what homeopathy was. With an acupuncturist, and she didn't teach them to me. She had made me a formula, and she made me get Rescue Remedy. And, this was key because I was working with her when my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and then also when he passed. And I was just devastated. Like my whole field, I couldn't get out of this like loop of grieving. Like I would just cry and cry. And so she would do the needles, but she would send me home with the flower essences. And it was like the work that she was doing energetically, I could take it with me. So when she wasn't there, because she would travel, I had that. And it was like this safety. And like you said, they became like my friends. And I couldn't imagine not having access to them at that point. And this was not knowing any of the science, or I didn't even know each thing that was in my remedy. She didn't want me to overanalyze it. And, so I was like, wow, this works. I don't know how this works. But she would say it's like homeopathic medicine or whatever. So then when I started working with homeopathy, I was like, oh, okay, I see. It's like the essence. It's not, it's not necessarily this material state of the medicine anymore.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've had a great experience with them. It's been, about 6 years of my life that I've worked with them, and just such a gentle, beautiful way. So could we talk a little bit about the history and how they were discovered?
Yes, absolutely. I adore the history of these, let me tell you. So they were originally discovered by a physician named Dr. Batch, and it is Batch, not Bach.
It's impossible to not see Bach, but
I know. I keep saying Bach in my head, and I have to correct myself and say, no, it's Batch. It's Batch. It's Batch. It's Batch.
Like, what's the opposite way I would think to pronounce this? That's what I think.
Yes, exactly. And so Dr. Batch was a physician. He was actually, he was a physician and he was a homeopath. And his goal in life was to find the purest form of healing. And in his ideal world, that healing came from nature. So early on in his career was very like conventional allopathic medical. And in doing that, he was very successful. But as it turned out, he really kind of started to stray away from the conventional model because he was more focused on the patient as people, which novel idea, as opposed to the case, like right. Seeing the patient as a case, right? Which is really a really big like distinction in his pathway to finding the flower essences, right? So with that, he really believed that attitude and mind and emotional state played a role in healing and healing outcomes. And so he felt that people that had, a stronger, I don't want to say stronger, but that were in a better mind space, they would heal and recover better from illnesses. So as he progressed in his career, he started to become really frustrated with the limitations that were placed on him by the orthodox medical system, right? So he left his career as a physician and started working as a pathologist and a bacteriologist, which is where he came across the work of Samuel Hahnemann, who is the father of homeopathy, right? So he he came after Samuel Hahnemann, but really Samuel Hahnemann's ideas really resonated with him, and he really appreciated the understanding of the emotional state and the energetic state of an illness, right? So you can kind of see this pathway starting to form. So he took Hahnemann's teachings and applied those to his own, and he came up first with the homeopathic nosodes, which I found really fascinating because I had thought they came from Hahnemann too, but they actually came from Dr. Batch. And but he still wasn't, like, that wasn't his end all be all, right? Because he felt that they were still not gentle enough. He wanted something more gentle and more natural. These were created from, bacteria, but he wanted something that was more like nature based,
like where you're
like
headed
plants,
versus like the similar.
Yes. Yeah. So he started doing observations of people and started recognizing that you could group people into types, and those types then could be used to inform decisions on like pathways to illness. And with that, he recognized that there were some substances he was already working with that he could take and use the same potentization method that Hahnemann was using and help heal them, just based off of their personality types. Right. Basically. So the first two substances that he used, the first two flowers that he used were, I believe it was mimulus and, oh shoot, the other one is escaping me. So, I may have to get back on that one, but there were two original ones that he had used. And he prescribed them to those personality types, and he had really, really good success with them. So from there, he started spending more time in nature. And when he did that, he actually was just out walking in a field. I think it was I'm pretty sure it was in Wales, walking in a field in the morning when the dewdrops were on all of the plants. And he made the connection that, hey, I'm out in this field, I'm feeling amazing, I'm surrounded by these plants, so there must be more to this. And so he took Hahnemann's methods of potentization and took the plants and flowers that he was surrounded by and combined them together to form this, what he called a complete system of 38 flower remedies. And they basically came from the water that was, he realized that what was happening was that the sun was taking the vibrational signature from the plant via the dewdrops that were on the plants. And he figured out how then to, let's call it, mass produce that into these flower remedies. And from there, his whole goal, so he actually, and I found this really interesting, so well before he had discovered this complete system, he was diagnosed with cancer, and they only gave him, a few months to live. And he, through his mindset training, ended up living several years beyond what they were talking about until he completed his full work on the flower remedies. And I don't know, I just think that it's really fascinating to go from this place of being this physician and really following the science to this more of like discovering the energetic component behind it, right? Because that's really what it is. It's using that energy that's coming from the plants to help realign our own energy and get our own energy back to center from being off balance. So
it's interesting because I just did an episode, and it'll, I think, release right before this one, and we talked about the chakras, we talked about the vital force and prana and things like that, and how vitality gets into the body And where does it even come from? Well, it comes from the sun. And so it's interesting. The dewdrop, the sun is like shining on the dewdrop. It's absorbing the prana. But then it has the signature of the plant because water stores memory.
Yes.
And so it's absorbing the vitality, but then it has the energy signature of the plant. And like, I just, like when you're talking, I was like, I see it. I can see it.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful epiphany, You're just in the moment, like walking through the meadows,
Yeah.
And it's just reconnecting with the beauty of nature. And it's so simple.
Yeah.
Right? We overcomplicated
Yes.
it. And he's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
I don't even need to be studying bacteria and viruses and,
Yeah.
like it's just right here in this beautiful experience.
Yeah.
That
was his big thing. I think you really touched on it. Like, he wanted this system to be simple, that anybody could pick it up and use it. And I think that's, going back to, what drew me to the flowers. Like, that's one of the things, like, there's beauty in the simplicity of that.
Right.
And how easy it is to use them and to just be. Right? Like, you don't have to be anything than what you are in that moment, and they meet you right where you're at.
Right where you're at. And it's interesting. I have a lot of friends that are herbalists, and they work with plants. They're getting this large amount of plants, especially if they're using essential oils and stuff too. And it's like, to make a tincture, there's so much material, and I have my little herbs and my flowers, and they're like, it was actually you and your flower garden that made me realize that there's something magical about the flowers, even though I can't use them the same way, but there's something special about them. And I'm like, well, you can, you can't work with them. It's just in this essenced form.
Yeah.
And I love it because we don't have to like harvest these giant amounts of plant material that our wildlife needs to thrive. And so we end up messing with the ecosystem. We just need like the dewdrop, right? You see like such a small amount, and it seems just more environmentally friendly to produce our medicines in this subtle way. And I don't know, it just kind of clicked to me. Like, I love herbalism. It has a place. I'm drinking herbal tea right now. But it's just kind of cool to like be the one that's introducing the beauty of these flowers too, like the trees and all this other stuff. Like, everything has medicine, And the herbs have just been studied a lot longer, so we're very familiar with it. But I do feel like, flower essences are coming to the surface right now, and people are starting to seek them. And, I've had some people suggest that they date way, way, way back, like pre-Diluvian, and that we rediscovered them when when we were ready for them.
Yeah.
Similar to like homeopathy, it's like in the Mahabharata, they're like making these little hints that they maybe kind of knew about homeopathy.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's kind of cool how it's evolved into this, like you said, this so simple that anybody could do it.
Yeah.
Having a practitioner is great to get started, I think, just to work with you. But like we were saying before, like you can't mess it up to the point where you're like, now my energy's all skewed.
Yeah.
And so it's like less intimidating to me than even homeopathy.
Oh, for sure.
Because, we took class together. I mean, like, you're taking a case. I mean, sometimes I might have spent like 45 minutes, like looking into every single avenue and all these symptoms and like just really in my analytical state.
Yeah.
But with flower essences, I'm not doing that. I'm in that, we were talking about, intuitive state.
Yep.
We're like, well, which one is resonating with me right now? Mm-hmm. And I don't have to worry about messing that up. And I feel like it takes some stress off because people are intimidated by homeopathy.
Yeah.
I mean, I was intimidated by it. It took me years to even get to the point. Yeah. I'm just now to the point where I'm like, I get why they told me to take that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because it's just non-intuitive. It's not an intuitive medicine. It's just like all the other medicines as far as it has a very scientific formula. But the flower essences are just so different. And I feel like we can just kind of let our spirit guide us, to which one do I need to work with? And,
well, yeah, I mean, my gosh, there's like so much like I can follow on that. Like, I'm right there with you. Like, I mean, it could be, and I mean, I haven't dived deep into it enough that they were even discovered. I mean, before, Dr. Batch formalized that, because if you think about, our ancestral roots, they used everything to heal, right? And they were very in tune with nature, and they understood like the laws in nature, like don't take more than you need. And I mean, and then you're starting to talk about like bringing in the homeopathy. So we're talking about law of minimum dose, right? So like don't take more flowers than you need. And the flower essences, like you need a drop, two drops from your tincture, right? Like 2 little measly drops, and it's just amazing, like the benefit that you get from that in such a sustainable way. Like the bottle, I have 30 milliliter bottles. They'll last me probably for the rest of my life if I'm being honest, because of how little you need to really feel like their healing potential.
I've only ever replaced Aspen. It's the only one. And it's because, I have, I guess, insecurities. And I would take it more just right on my tongue. But when I put them in like the teas and stuff like that, I feel like it goes a lot longer because it's like going to potentize the whole beverage that you're drinking. So a little drop, you could put it in a huge glass of water, and now that whole glass of water is resonating. So that's the better way to use them more efficiently. But with the Aspen, I would be like in a moment where I'm like, I just need it right now. So
and I mean, sometimes there is a need for that, right? There's this whole concept of like a loading dose, right? Where you're upfronting everything because you're so out of balance that you need that extra support. But I don't think that that's necessarily straining from a sustainable way, because you take what you need. You don't take more, you don't take less, you take what you need. And if that's what you need in that moment, then that's what you need, right? Like it's not it's not like necessarily doing the wrong thing. Like you're following your own intuition. Yes, your own cues. Full circle.
Yes, I love this. I love this so much. So we've talked a little bit about like the dewdrops, but could you go into a little bit more detail about like how the essences are made?
Yeah.
And can anyone make their own?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that you can make it. There's two primary methods. So originally, Dr. Batch had made them from literally collecting dewdrops from the source. Obviously, trying to get that out on a larger scale, that wasn't really scalable. So there's the sunshine method, and there's the boiling method. And so the sunshine method uses the flowers, the buds of flowers. So you pick the buds of flowers, you put them in pure water, and it has to be pure water because, as you hinted before, water has memory and water has energy, and there are such things as living and non-living water. And so you want to make sure that the water that you're using is a pure form of water, so it can align itself vibrationally with the flowers. And so you put the flower buds in a bowl in the morning, in the sun, full sun for the whole morning, so at least 3 hours. And that will then take the frequency from the flowers and put it in the water. And then that water gets preserved, typically with brandy. That's the classical way. But there are other preservatives that can be used, like cider vinegar or vegetable glycerin. They may just not last as long. But if there are concerns about having it preserved with alcohol, there are other ways to do that. So then once you have that first, like, the water, that first mix of the water with the brandy, that becomes your mother tincture. And then from there, you can use drops from that to make a stock preparation. So you would then take, for the 38 original remedies, you would take 2 drops from the mother tincture and put them in a mixture of a second mixture of brandy and water. And that would then become or whatever other preservative you choose. And then that would become your stock supply. So that's typically used for flower buds. So not all of the flower essences are actually flowers.
Right.
Some of them come from hardier plants, and there's even one that actually, it's rock water. It doesn't come from a plant at all.
Right. I like that one a lot too.
Yeah. That one's a good one. That's a very like solid, like unwavering one. So if you're having some difficulties with flexibility, that might be one you want to look into. But they use the boiling method, and so it's essentially the same concept where you're putting it in the pure water, but then you're boiling it to extract the energy from the plant into the water, and then from there you prep your mother tincture and then your stock solution just as you would with the sunshine method. And so anybody can make them. The caveat is, though, you have to use them from a pure source. So not only the water, but you wouldn't want to source them from somewhere that could be contaminated with pesticides or anything like that, which may be a little bit difficult to source, unless you are doing it like purely like yourself and you're controlling the growing and from start to finish. Some people even make them from they make their own essences. So the original 38 that Dr. Batch came up with, people have expanded into other flowers. I'm not as informed on ones outside of the original 38, but people will make essences from crystals, from different minerals, from all different kinds of flowers that are outside of the 38.
And even the moon water that people make. Yeah. I'm like, that's homeopathic.
Yeah, that was another preparation method I was reading on, that instead of using sun, you can use the moon
So cool.
in a similar sense, but it extracts it from a slightly different perspective, right? It charges it energetically differently than the sun would, which I was like, whoa, that's kind of fascinating. Like, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But yeah.
I love studying this stuff because it's like, I'm always expanding. And then as I live my life, I'm like, oh, I hadn't put this together. But it's like this living wisdom that, like, as I mature and grow as a person, I go deeper into understanding, the whole concept of it. And so it's just like, there's some of it that you can learn from a book, and then there's also this wisdom that you learn just by working with them and living your life and like having this personal experience. So
yeah, I mean, everything is energy, right? And so once you understand how to recognize that, right? I mean, it's always there, right? But sometimes our world kind of shuts us off from that. And once you kind of unlock that potential again and you recognize how to feel like the energy of all of these different things around you, it just opens your whole world up in a completely different, and it's like, it's like all of a sudden you're like hearing colors, and it's like,
because once you start to work with subtle energy, which is what's happening with the flowers, you start to just pick up on energy signatures in general. So I found this with tarot cards. Someone would be talking and it's like, without even using the tarot cards, like I can see the spread because it's an energy signature in that card. The Empress holds that fertility within her. And so as they're talking, I'm like,
yeah,
she's pregnant.
So exactly.
It's like, it's weird, but it's like, it's everything. And, it's interesting because when I was reading this book on the flower essences, we talked about Hahnemann inspiring him, but it's also very symbiotic with anthroposophical medicine. And when I was studying anthroposophy, there are techniques when we were trying to connect with subtle energies, and one is to meditate with plants regularly. And as you meditate with the plant, you really start to become friends with it. You really are like, oh, well, every time I sit with rosemary is a big one for me. Like she has like a form to me when I work with her, and a personality, and it's different than lavender. And so, that was like 101. Start meditating with plants and asking yourself how they're different and how you feel in their presence. And when you're in this state, when you're with that plant, how is it different? And then you move to crystals, minerals, meditating with those. How does an amethyst feel different, than like lapis? Or then you move on to animals. So it's like, well, a horse. When I'm meditating with a horse, it's different when I meditate with a cat. And so what you're doing is you're spending time with the energy of that living being, because it's all alive, and you get to know it as a friend. And they talk about in our homeopathic class, get to know your remedies as friends, and then you won't need your materia medica because you're like, oh, this is a cow carb. Like, this is a cow carb case. It's resonating through everything that they're saying.
Yeah.
So it's when we start to practice, and this is where meditation is such a good thing, because it puts us in a really calm state to where we can start to really pick up on, like, what is my inner voice telling me, and like, what am I sensing, And so when we're in that state, we understand the subtle energies more. So anyways, I had to go off with that.
Well, and I think, like, when you say that, I think so, going back a little bit to our homeopathy class, there were several supplemental readings that we had to do, right? And there were a few that were on indigenous cultures and the relationship that indigenous cultures had with nature. And one of, like, the key takeaways from those readings for me was how they referred to everything as people, right? So you have the tree people, and you have the flower people, and I think that that language really shifted my perspective on looking at, the energy of all of that. Because when you recognize that tree, the tree that I'm looking at, right behind your head right now, is a living, breathing, energetic entity, it gives you a very different perspective on, what you can learn from it and what it can learn from you.
Right.
And
mutual.
And your relationship, right? It makes it mutual, and it makes you connected to it. And it bringing it back to the sustainability piece, like, you don't want to take any more from that tree than you want that tree to take from you. And it just opens up a completely different perspective to how you view the world when you start tapping into those subtle energies. And it can really shift you as a human too.
Right. And it's I was trying to get Justin to get Winston. It's a holistic lifestyle. So we hear about, this holistic approach. We just think about health a lot of times, but it goes beyond that. It's a way of living in unity, right, with the world around you, and feeling whole and interconnected with that. And so, I'm taking this homeopathy class, and I just wasn't quite prepared for how how deep it was going to get, like, these collective energies that we're working with.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into some of the flower essences for that. But it's just, like, so big, it's so grand, and it's an amazing. It's like the most fun rabbit hole I've ever went down.
Oh, so. I know.
All right, so now that you've kind of described how they're made, could we dive into some of their common uses?
Yeah. So I'm going to take a step back real quick to the question you asked before on the history. So what Dr. Batch discovered really was that they're an energy medicine, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about with, like, homeopathy and with flower essences, and that it's working on your energy. And so they believed that illness and disease started outside of the body, right? It started in your energetic field, and then there was this susceptibility. Let's think of it like an opening, right? In your force field, if you will. And from there, disease trickled down. So if it wasn't addressed at that level, it would go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So the flowers, they come in at that layer, that, like, when you first recognize, hey, there's a subtle shift in my energy, or there's a subtle shift in the way that I'm feeling, or maybe I'm feeling a little bit more emotional today, or I'm feeling a little bit more firm today. I'm just not feeling right. Like, I'm not feeling centered. I'm not feeling grounded. And so that's where they really shine, right? They shine in that emotional healing, working through, big feelings, or working through challenging situations, grief, anxiety, depression, those types of things. That's where you can really step in and see, like, their full potential. There are some people that will use them on, like, for addressing more physical things, but I'm not so sure that they're necessarily working on the physical as they're working on the emotional component tied to the physical, and then it trickles down. Yeah. So they're super gentle. With as far as healing modalities are concerned, they're some of the most gentle I've ever experienced. And they complement any type of therapy. So you can use them in support or in conjunction, like you had mentioned, finding out about them through your acupuncturist.
Right.
I found out about them through homeopathy. You can use them with any other supportive therapy. And there's the thing that's great about them beyond, them being so simple is that there's really no risk of them interfering with that. You can't overdose them because they're working to align you back to center, right? You can't be in over alignment with yourself.
Right.
So there's no major like side effects. So they're great if you're concerned about like, well, how is this going to interact with, XYZ therapy that I'm doing, or how is this, going to interfere? Like sometimes when you're working with the pure forms, like in herbal forms, there can be some concern with using certain herbs with certain populations, or even homeopathic remedies.
Right.
Like there can be provings and there can be aggravations and things that occur like that with those modalities. But with the flowers, I think, they're best in situations where you're dealing with, major emotional turbulence and you're looking for a gentle way to really bring yourself back to yourself and be able to move through that emotion without getting stuck in an out of balance state. Yeah. Or becoming that emotion. So yeah, I think you can take them, like common uses, if you have, like a major event coming up, you can lean on them to help you work through any anticipatory anxiety that you have. If you're experiencing grief from losing a loved one, they can help you with that. I find them really helpful. I have a neurodivergent child, who has really, really big feelings. And I find them really helpful with helping her navigate, how she's expressing and how she's moving through her emotions. I use them with my pets. We have a lot of dogs and cats that cohabitate, and sometimes there can be a lot of wildness with that. So they help kind of balance things. So really anytime that you're feeling out of balance from yourself or disconnected from yourself, I think that's a great opportunity to look at the flowers to bring you back to like into your body and to center.
Yeah, I think one of the most supportive ways I've used them and really like noticed them aside from the grief was when I was doing EMDR for my CPTSD. You're bringing all this stuff up to the surface and you're kind of re-feeling it. Yeah. And that's fine, but you don't want it to linger, like you say, because that's when it trickles down and becomes a physical thing. Mm-hmm. So we're bringing it to the surface and then we're moving it out. Mm-hmm. And so, it was just crazy, the difference, because I was doing it some before I knew what flower essences were. And then I started bringing the flower essences in and I was like, oh, it's like I wasn't as shook for as long.
Yeah.
When I was implementing the flower essences in with therapy. So I'm always suggesting them to my friends that are about to go into it, like just in case, at the end you're just feeling like a lot of grief or all that stuff's coming out. Yeah. Take the flower essences with you because you already know it's going to come to the surface. Yeah. So,
yeah, that's a really good, definitely a good time to use them if you're in, if you're working through some past traumas, and like you said, you're bringing that up to the surface. I use them now regularly on, my constitutional treatment. Right. And it's usually at times where I'm feeling like, that breaks that, well, I don't want to say breaks open, but that resurfaces a lot of
Yes.
wounds that have been buried very deeply for a very long time. And, when you don't process that stuff as a kid, and like, when I was a child, you didn't really express your feelings, right? Like you just kind of pushed them down and, walked away from it. And, it can be scary going through that as an adult because you didn't have the language for the feelings then, or the emotions then, and you don't necessarily have the language for it now, but you have that feeling, right? And you can tap into that feeling, and you can connect that feeling back to the flowers, and they can help you move it along so it doesn't just come up and go back down and then come up again, and so you don't get stuck in this cycle of having to refeel it, because you already lived through it once, and then it's hard enough to go through it when you're healing. So we want to move it through.
Right. And what a gift, because you think about all of these people and they're stuck in these patterns, and it's almost like there's just no hope. I mean, it's like, how will they get out of that? I mean, they're on a loop.
Yep.
It's like a glitch.
Yeah.
And then we have this medicine that helps us change that loop and start a whole new pattern. And it's just like, whoa, like that's amazing. And that's where homeopathy like blew my mind. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to be trapped here.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the trauma girl.
Yeah.
Like for the rest of my life, you know? And what a gift, to have medicine like this.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that people take and work with the flower essences? I know in our class they had brought up some things that I was like, oh, I had never considered taking it that way. So
so kind of like we've been talking about, they really are like easy to work with. And for the longest time, I felt like I was stuck in this place of, it can't really be that simple, right? Like I can't just put a couple drops in my water and drink and refill my water all day and it still work, right? So but it really is. And so if you find yourself like thinking a lot about like ways to use it, you're probably like overcomplicating it, and you're stuck in that analytical mindset, which we can talk about because there's flowers for that. But you can use them in all kinds of ways. So put them in your water, drop a couple drops on your food, use a couple right in your mouth. Try not to touch the dropper into your mouth, but you can do a drop like right from the bottle. And oftentimes, we've mentioned rescue a couple times. That is one of the primary ways to use rescue, because it's often used in a very emergent situation. Right. You may not have another modality.
Right. You just spray it right.
You can use them topically. So you can, if going back to the concerns about having alcohol as the preservative, you don't actually have to ingest it. You can put it on your skin.
Right.
You can diffuse it. You can put it in a spray bottle and spray it on your plants. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use it and not necessarily have to ingest it if you're not comfortable with ingesting it. But the primary way that I like to use them is in my water, because I can do it in the morning. I can wake up, I can see how I'm feeling in the morning. I can tweak what I'm taking that day based on how I'm feeling, and maybe I might not need anything that day. Maybe I'm, feeling like, okay, this is a great day. I don't feel like I need the extra support from the flowers, so I don't have to add it to my water. But if I do, then I just take a couple drops from the bottle, I put it in my water, and I'm good to go for the day. Typically, I would, if you're first starting out with them and you're working on that initial phase of healing, you could consider doing a loading dose where you're really, you're putting it in your water, you're putting it in everything you drink for the day, everything you drink or eat you put a couple drops on it, just to get your body to like recognize, hey, this is the direction we're going. Right. You can do that for a few days, and then they'll tell you, your body will tell you when it's okay, it's clicked for me now. And it'll, when you feel it, you'll feel it in your body. You'll feel the shift in your body, and you'll know like, okay, I can just drop to my water today. I don't necessarily need to put it in every meal. And generally, if you're taking it and let's say you've been, really like structured and scheduled about doing this like very regimented every day. And then let's say you forget a couple days in a row. That's them.
That's
Usually
a good sign.
that's a good sign. Yeah.
Right. Because you're not worried about it anymore.
Yeah. You're not worried about it anymore. You don't feel like you need it. And that's usually like a clue. Okay. Hey, I can back off and like, I can like, this is my body's way of telling me and the flower's way of telling me that like,
I'm doing okay.
I'm doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The diffuser is what I was like, what? Because I think that would be so good if like something had happened with your family.
Yes.
Like, and it was like kind of a group, like everyone was really stressed. Like maybe
Yeah.
the dog passed or like you got in a car wreck, everyone was in the car together.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's just causing a similar disharmony within the whole house.
Yep.
Diffusing it.
Yep.
And I was like, that's genius. That's genius. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I'll learn like so many more ways, but
Yeah.
my friend had sprayed them. So I gave her a bottle and I didn't think to tell her like that you can ingest it,
Yeah.
but she was spraying them
Yeah.
all in her field. And she like was taking notes on like how they were shifting and she got like the exact same benefits,
Yeah.
just misting.
Yep.
So I was like, well, that's really cool. I'm glad you did that. And because I wouldn't have told her to do it that way. I wasn't thinking that way, but, they worked just as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that, I mean, I think that's, another one of those little things that's like really beautiful about being able to work with them is that like you can take them in the way that resonates best
Right.
with you.
right. And then change it up if you feel
yeah.
like, well, maybe I'm just wanting to sip it in my tea today.
Yep. Yep.
So
yeah. The other thing too that, I think is a good point to touch on when you talk about like diffusing them and for the whole family, they are safe too for the whole family.
Right.
So
and for the animals.
Now, if you have them preserved in alcohol, you
Right.
probably want to be a little bit cautious about that. But they do make like rescue remedy for pets. So
Right,
you
right.
can find that really easily. And they have, you can buy the essences that are preserved in glycerin and use
Right.
them for the pets. My kit is not that, but it is available, so that way you can
Good to know.
you can use them for the pets. And if you do have a concern, let's say you have something that comes up with a pet, like you can use it topically. So you can put a little bit of it on their ear, you can put a little bit of on their paw, and then they're not ingesting it,
Right.
But they're still getting the benefit of it. So if you do have a kit that's preserved in alcohol and need to use it with your pet, there are other modalities to use it with populations that may be sensitive
Right.
to alcohol.
Right.
So
we were kind of talking about like the collective aspect of it all. So I'm wondering if you have any specific remedies that you think may be good for us as a collective at this time.
that's a loaded question. That's such a loaded question. And I could
From your
probably
personal
go on for days with it. But, there's a lot going on in today's world. A lot. And I try to do my best personally to like disconnect as much as I can from that. But when you're working with energies, it is very hard. So there's a lot of trauma out there. And so I think my biggest recommendations now are looking at how that trauma is expressed across the collective and across your like how individually you're experiencing that collective trauma, right? And so looking at essences that are connected to fear or uncertainty, I think are immensely valuable now. So the flowers, there are 38 original flowers and they're grouped into 7 different categories, right? And so there's this overarching category, let's say, of fear. And then how you experience that fear will then kind of direct you to which
right.
essence you would take. So if you are experiencing fear in the form of terror, you would look towards rock rose, right? To help move you through that. you had mentioned aspen. So if you're experiencing fear that you can't really put your finger on what's causing this fear, but it's just this overall sense of I'm waiting for the bottom to drop out or I'm having to walk on eggshells, then you would look at aspen. If you can name the specific fear, like fear of poverty or fear of becoming, homeless, or fear of a specific terrible event happening, right? You would look towards mimulus. So you could start by looking at, the overall type, which for the collective, I would recommend looking in the fear and uncertainty categories. And then really sitting with yourself and thinking, okay, how is this fear or how is this uncertainty showing up in my life? And that's going to direct you to like a more specific remedy. Right now, for me, I have been using a lot of the combo of walnut and crabapple, because walnut helps you helps protect you from outside influences and change related to those outside influences, and crabapple is a very cleansing essence. The two of them combined really form this sort of like protective barrier that helps keep your energy and the energy of the people around you separate, right? So you're not taking on other people's energy. And I have found that combination unbelievably helpful in today's world, and having to navigate being somebody that deeply feels energy, having to go out and do public things. So those I think are a really good combo to use. A couple other that I think may be worthwhile looking into, especially with things that the collective are experiencing right now. Gorse would be a really good one. And gorse is kind of like that. If you think of Winnie the Pooh and you think of Eeyore, gorse is that feeling, right? That like, oh, bother, why try? Like that constant, like just feeling of like hopeless, and like you'll still do the things, but you're like, why am I even bothering to do this? Because it's not going to work out anyway, but I guess I have nothing else to do, so I'll just do the thing. Hornbeam is another really good one. It's for that Monday morning kind of feeling. So when you're, not wanting to continue doing the things because you're just feeling like the weight of everything. Like you don't want to get out of bed and, do life. Hornbeam's a good one. And then oak and olive are other ones that I think would be really good to, as a collective, to explore right now, because they're really about feelings of exhaustion, right? So oak would be more for if you're experiencing that you're exhausted, but you're pushing through, like that constant need of like having to go, like I can't stop doing the things, like I'm tired, but I've got to go and I've got to do this. Whereas olive is more for just this general lack of energy, like you've been doing too many things for too long. The other two that I would recommend would be Star of Bethlehem, which is just good in general for trauma. So anytime, you don't even have to go into details about the trauma. I mean, everybody's trauma is different, but anytime that you're experiencing trauma or have experienced trauma, Star of Bethlehem is a really good one to move that. And then, of course, the beloved Rescue Remedy.
Right.
I mean, gosh, I keep that stuff stashed everywhere nowadays. Yes. But yeah, that's another really good one. And that's kind of like, it's kind of like, arnica is like the gateway into homeopathy, like rescue is like the gateway into flower essences, right? It's common. People know a lot about it. So, yeah, find some of that and get you some of that. And then you can explore a little bit more from there, because I guarantee once you get some rescue in your system, you'll see what the essences are all about. So
where is a good place for people to start learning more about the flower essences? that can help them choose the best ones based on their needs?
Yeah, so I really like, so there's two websites that I would really recommend to take a look at that. So there's the Healing Herbs website, and I can give you that.
Yeah, I can put it in the description.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can put that one in the description. And then there's the Batch Flower Learning as well. So the Healing Herbs website, they have a whole section where you can go in and put it, it's like a remedy selector, right? So you can put in what you're feeling and it'll, give you some suggestions. There's also some really good written resources as well, right? So the main source that I use when I'm trying to understand the remedies is it's a little PDF book that I have called the 38 Flower Remedies, and it's put out by the Batch Group, and that gives you a little overview of what the negative aspects are that are associated with it, and then also the positive potential, which I love about the flowers, right? So even in how Dr. Batch wrote about them, he wrote both sides of the coin, so you know where you're coming from and where you're working towards. I just think that's really beautiful. And so the thing, maybe just a little like heads up about it, is that they're very small descriptions, right? And it's intentionally done that way. So it's not like when you pull up like a homeopathic Materia Medica where you've got pages and pages, right? It is intentionally very short to keep it simple and to not overthink it. And so if you read it and you're like, well, there's got to be more to this. What am I missing? Like, how do I do a deeper dive into this? How do I look more into that? That's probably also a clue for maybe an essence
Which one
you might want to include in your little mix. So I can't stress enough, don't overthink it. It's meant to be simple so that anybody could pick it up and just get going with it. So yeah, I would start there, because that's really the foundational piece. Anything you can read by Julian Bernard. He has a book available as well that kind of goes over all of the information that we're talking about today. It's a really good like beginner's resource to have too. So yeah, I would suggest starting there.
So are you taking clients?
I am, yes. So I am starting to take clients, both with flowers and with homeopathy, just acutes for homeopathy now. I'm not into the chronic state yet, but yeah, I am also available as a resource to help put something together and through wellness. So that would be another place you could also take a look too.
Yeah. So what would be the easiest way for people to get in contact with you to discuss?
Probably the easiest way right now is through email, which is wildoatwellness at gmail.com. And it's oat, not oats. I know a lot of times I'll be typing and I'll throw that extra S in there, but it is intentionally Wild Oat Wellness. So yeah, and then I am also on Facebook and Instagram as well. So I generally just share information about the flowers, overall different things that I've learned through my healing journey or things that have inspired me. That's the type of information you'll see out there. But if you're trying to get in contact with me, the best method will be through email. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have loved this episode so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been so fun.
Yeah, thanks for everything. I know the audience will love it. So you're just such a beautiful source of wisdom. So
well, thank you. I hope we get to do this again. This has been.
I would love to do a homeopathy episode, because I'm like, how do I do that? I don't just want to do a monologue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it would be cool to just talk about what we learned in school and like kind of the basic steps for someone that just wanted to do some acute care.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fun. And the journey to becoming a homeopath.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot. And I think people would be interested in it because it's kind of a niche thing. Like not a lot of people are sharing about the process. So.
And it's so much like deconstructing and reconstructing and, you know, looking at things from a completely different perspective than you've been taught or suggested about your whole life. So
right. And I'm so grateful that we met and that I have a friend that speaks this language and it's just such a gift. So
yeah. So
I would also like to add that Ashley and I will be co-teaching a class on homeopathy coming up on Saturday, February 22nd from 10:30 to 4:30 at the Sacred Owl and Salt Room in Knoxville. It will be $200 for a full 6-hour class. We will be going over everything you need to know for first aid prescribing at home, as well as laying down a solid foundation for homeopathic philosophy, teaching you how to use the repertory and how to match a remedy. You can contact Ashley at her email address or myself at theastralhour@yahoo.com to reserve a spot.
well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.